we censor what we say with respect to trade secrets and like stuff we want to announce, but not otherwise. So like, this is how we talk about stuff. These are our real opinions, and this is how
we're not good at acting.
No.
Butterscotch
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 522 of Coffee with Butterscotch, the game dev comedy podcast of Butterscotch Shenanigans. I'm Seth and I'm the games programmer.
I'm Adam and I'm the miscellaneous programmer.
I'm Sam and I'm the artist.
And this is a show where we talk about life, business, and working in the games industry. Today's May 23rd, 2020 vibes. Before we get started, we have a warning. There's going to be profanity in this show. And we'd also like to thank our recurring supporters over at moneygrab.bscotch.net. Thank you so much for your monthly donations to help keep the podcast going. So we don't have a ton to talk about in terms of studio stuff because we're just chugging away on Crashlands 2, patch 1.2. Last week we talked about the new scramble mode and the hardcore mode, which are being refined. And then we've also got some other fun little extra content bits and stuff that we're working on this week, but we're not going to talk about them because we're just going to, kind of unveil them when the time is right. But there's one thing we wanted to talk about, which is our favorite topic, AI.
Yeah. What's new? What's hot? What's the new hotness in the AI space?
There's a lot that happened this week because Google had 1 trillion announcements of all these different new AI things that they're doing. But we wanted to kind of talk more specifically about the video side of things. Mm-hmm. So Google announced this VEO 3, VEO is called, I think it's called VEO, not VEO.
I think those are like, isn't that like the drops you put in your water to make it taste good? Oh, that's Mio. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know about that. Yeah.
Get them all mixed up. The AI technology, sugary drinks, whatever.
It's all the same.
Yeah.
So this is a huge jump for a number of reasons. So, we talked in the past about how like people would use the Will Smith eating spaghetti thing as sort of like the test of how good AI video generation is, because it was about a year ago or maybe like a year and a half ago where some of these video generators first started appearing and people started using them and they created these eldritch abominations out of pretty much everything.
Just fever dreams. Like you're watching something and it like a person walks, morphs into like a cat and then disappears into a cloud of fire. It was just insane, right?
Yeah,
just
left legs become right legs. Yeah, it's all very...
Yeah, so there was like a couple of core problems with it was basically like physics and consistency, where, like you're saying, stuff becomes other stuff. You'd see somebody like pick up a can of something to drink it, and like as they start to drink it, it would like meld into their face and then become a beard or something.
Real weird shit.
But it's weird because you're right. It literally feels like a dream.
Yes.
Where like it resembles real life, sort of like moment by moment. Like if you capture any frame of it, it seems fine. But once you watch it in motion, nothing really means anything. And it's all just kind of this weird goo, So those days are quickly moving into the rearview mirror because with this new Google video generator thing, it still has kind of janky physics. So like I watched some videos of like fight scenes where people are punching, like fighting each other, and it does not really work. But aside from that, a lot of the consistency problems are gone. A lot of the weird like fever dream shit is kind of gone. And it does audio with the video.
Which is real spooky. So I guess the probably one to look up, and maybe we'll put a link to the show notes, is just at least the one that I saw that was freaky enough for me was it was like a car show interview, as if it was as if it was like a TV or a YouTuber interviewing people at a car show, different people talking about different parts, different like aspects of the cars that they like, whatever else. So you got the lighting is particular in like a conference center. People are like squared up in the middle of the thing, but then like they have a crowd behind them. The cars are there and they're talking, and it's so weird because you can't. I mean, I guess it's the first time, at least as a person who's aware of this stuff, that I did have to like rewatch it and really like pay attention to find some stuff, right? That was...
Well, if you weren't told in advance that it was an AI video, you wouldn't really be...
I wouldn't be paying enough attention, you know what I mean? To like...
Yeah, essentially there's just like right now, there's like a couple of tells that it's AI, and it basically comes down to faces, where like sometimes facial expressions don't quite match what is happening, like what the person is saying. It's not quite the dead-eyed uncanny valley thing, but it's like in that kind of domain. But the other thing is that because it generates the audio as well as the video, then every now and then you'll see somebody's mouth move in a way that doesn't quite match the sound of the words that they're saying.
I think the tricky part about that, though, is that there's always been some artifacting in videos.
Exactly.
Right? In live videos.
Or if you're watching it on like a phone or like a small screen, like you would not notice.
Yeah. So I only started noticing when I was paying attention to the people in the back. And you start seeing some of the merging happening, where it's like someone walks supposedly like behind another person, kind of in the background, and they clearly just like merge into a shape together. Yeah,
right.
So there's
but you're only looking at the background because you're looking for the artifacts, because you knew in advance, like, oh yeah, this is an AI video, so there's gonna be some weird shit. Let's see if I can spot it. You know?
So we're at the point now where like that's really good on as far as like the quality of that is getting really, really good, where it looks exactly like. At least it's very much passable, even if you're looking for it. And so I guess the question then is like, what does that mean? What does it mean?
Yeah, because the phrase that people in the AI, like AI, what people call like AI doomers and boomers, right? Like people who think that AI is going to like go crazy, or people who think AI is going to just fall apart, and like people who are the AI boomers, they always like to say, this is the worst. This is the worst that it's ever going to be going forward, which is probably true, right? Like, it's going to improve in various ways, and it's like I think around the time that OpenAI announced their Sora video generator, which was not even good. I remember reading about Tyler Perry, the director. He was working on like an $800 million facility to like work to shoot all of his films and stuff like that. And he just scrapped the whole thing as soon as OpenAI announced their Sora thing, because he was like, well, by the time I'm finished building this facility, I won't need it because of the pace of that this stuff is going on. And I mean,
he's probably not wrong.
Okay, so here's the thing. Here's the thing. Yeah, he's right in terms of like if you're talking about just like getting video, and like the thing is, it looks good. It's cinematic shots, everything's there. There is a problem of like control and consistency, and there's also a public backlash problem, right? Yeah, of people still don't want to consume AI generated content, but I'm thinking like kind of in the long run, it's kind of like having ads in your streaming service.
Yes.
Where people don't want it, but it's going to be there at some point. And then pretty soon people just stop giving a shit that it's there, And so my assumption is that like in the short term, there's going to be some subset of people who are like trying to use these AI video generators. We've already seen it in the games industry, not with video, but with things like loading screens that are AI generated or wallpapers or whatever. And then players figure it out, and then there's this big backlash. But
how much of that content is not being figured out?
Exactly.
And it gets harder and harder to tell. So it's like, this is where it starts really getting.
If you can get away with it, like if people don't notice, and you can say, well, I could hire a whole film crew and we could spend 6 months shooting this thing and then editing it and having a visual effects team layer in all the CGI and do all this stuff. Or, I could spend a week prompting this thing until I get what I want, and then I've got it, right? But the problems come down to things like right now it only generates short clips. I think like 5 or 10 seconds or something like that, and there's not really any consistency between videos. So if you were to try to make
a lot of the problems are the same as they've always been, right?
So if you were to try to make like
which is it's always a context. Yeah, it's a context problem. It can't maintain context over large windows, and large basically means like how much of the already generated data can be put back into the loop, like as you go. Right. Because you can't have a feature length film where like the first 89 minutes of it go back into the model to give you your last minute, you know what I mean? So you can't, it's not physically manageable. And so, I still like the videos are extremely impressive. I still hate it because the idea that you can use text to generate realistic video to me is only bad. I don't see an upside in terms of like impact on humanity. It's just
well,
bad.
what it basically does is it moves the domain of the dead internet from text to
video. Yeah.
Everything, right? So like on YouTube, it's already the case. Like just this morning, I was on YouTube and I was watching like Ezra Klein on YouTube, and then there's this recommended video on the side about stuff going on in the U.S. bond market, and I was like, oh, I should check that out. So I open it up, and it's a bunch of currently stock footage, but clearly with an AI generated script and an AI generated voice.
Yep.
Just going, and I'm like, okay, fucking block this channel. But this is just more and more channels are like this, even though right now a person still has to go to a stock footage site, which there are quite a few of them now, download the clips, generate the AI voice, stitch it together in something like Final Cut or whatever.
Yeah. Well, there's an interesting, I think, sort of a convergence of some trends here that is the particular one that freaks me out a bit, which is that social video, right? It's like TikTok, whatever else, is like a all-consuming machine at this point. So like video games, for example, like every industry now that is in the entertainment space is basically constrained by the fact that social video is increasingly eating all of everybody's time. And I'm not even kidding, where it's like people, like teenagers, 20-year-olds, whatever else, are spending like 6 hours a day on TikTok, whatever else. Like there's no more time that people could be spending.
Yeah, no time for books, no time for movies, no time for video games.
Right.
And
the question is like, what kind of content does really well there? And it's very short clips.
Oh yeah.
Very short clips.
TikTok is about to be just absolutely blasted by these short AI videos.
So that's where it gets to, where it's like, okay, so you have this convergence then of like, okay, the most popular form of media intake is these short form things. You have these AI generation videos now that can maintain their consistency over a very short window, right? Or if you're doing like a little compilation, like interview clips, which is also very, very common, kind of format for some of those videos, like people interviewing at a convention center, just talking to people, whatever. You could just do like 10 of them back to back. They're 5-10 seconds. No one's going to know that it's
and importantly, seeing is believing, right? So like we have this tendency to, if we see a video of something, then we're like, yeah, that happened, right?
Yeah.
And so if let's say, and like we already knew this happened with various countries, but Russia in particular, having a huge concerted effort to, actually it wasn't even that huge. It was like 1,000 people, I think, to just flood social media, Reddit, Facebook, whatever, with whatever the propaganda of the day is. And they just make comment after comment after comment on dozens or hundreds or even thousands of alternate accounts to create public consensus on things, or to like create a narrative about what's going on in the world.
Or even just to say Discord, right?
Yeah.
It's even easier to do that.
Well, I mean, even outside of like the intentionally evil case, I don't know if you guys saw, there was a I can't remember where they were based, but there was an academic group based somewhere in Europe who was people learned very recently that they had been doing a study on the ability of LLMs to basically like sway users, person sentiment, basically, right? And so they put a bunch of AI models into some subreddit that's all about like debating or arguing about something. I can't remember what the details were. Oh God! But for like a long period of time, so that these Reddit, these fake Reddit users actually had like lots of karma, had become very like popular on the site, and were just like arguing. But it was like they were kind of both sidesing it, right? They were like, we need to have like evil ones and good ones, so we can like see what happens when we turn these things loose. Just
create chaos.
Basically. And they were doing it because they wanted to study it, right? And of course, like, as soon as people found out about that, everyone's like, this is the most deeply unethical study that I have ever seen. And they are anonymous because the university's not publishing their names. The university's like putting out apologies, doing an investigation, and like all this kind of stuff, But like, even when people aren't setting out to do this, right, on purpose, if what you're trying to do is basically be like,
it's not that hard to do.
No. And if you want to generate ad money on TikTok or something, because you can use it because you're trying to sway a populist one way or the other, right? But the other thing you can do is just say like, I'm just going to follow whatever trends seem like they're making money and just churn out videos that like feel like they fit those, whatever those are.
But the thing is, like, what makes money, especially on social media, is outrage, right? So like, if I'm like a left-leaning person and I'm on TikTok, and then there's all these videos that are not discernibly AI generated, but they are AI generated of people on the other side of the political spectrum saying all kinds of heinous things.
Bait, right?
And then the opposite is also true, where you basically like create straw men out of political positions and make videos about with fake people sort of advocating for these insane positions. And then it seems real. It seems like there's these people believe this.
What's so strange is the fact that we're rapidly, I mean, we're basically already there, but like just descending into a place where anything you're consuming online is just not like, how can you trust any of it? Do you know what I mean?
I mean, it's already the case that for me, when I'm doing just like basic search engine research, like I'm trying to find some piece of information, my mental model has fully switched. The way that I evaluate stuff that I'm looking at is now I start with the assumption that it's just false and made by an LLM. And so the way that I actually like try to figure out if something is potentially valid, and I think that's really fucking frustrating about these things is they're so low content, right? That if you're trying to find something, you'll find 1,000 articles that all give a surface level LLM description of that thing, right? And that's just completely obliterate the ability to find like the good stuff, But so my practice now is like to try to find an article. I'm already evaluating it when I see it in the search engine result to like see if it has like the vibe of bullshit, of LLM-iness. And then I'm like skipping through to try to find something that seems like it might have something. And then when I open that up, I first scan the length of it. And if it's really short, I'm like, okay, this is LLM bullshit again. And I go like try to find something else, right? And then once I find something that seems like it might be real, I like pay attention to the date that it was published. And then I go try to figure out who the author is.
I was going to say, is there an author? But the author could be a fucking, you could just make
you don't know. But like,
right?
So now my, like the way that I've fully switched over from basically like trusting like the big sites that seem like they curate lots of interesting content to almost exclusively trusting long-lived blogs by randos, right?
Any blog that's existed since pre-2020, basically.
Yeah, because I know those people and that publish like once a month or whatever, because like I know those people are not fucking with this. Like they are random experts in random fields with just opinions about random, because those blogs too are usually like, it's like mine, it's like, oh, here's a recipe. Oh, here's how to think about error classes in JavaScript. Oh, here's my thoughts on this book that I just read. It's like, it's random shit. And I'm like, yeah, this is a person making stuff because they want to and because they have knowledge they want to share. And like, that's now the only thing that I feel like I can trust when I'm looking for information,
Yeah, it's
already
weird.
Yeah, so there's then on the flip side, there's also the Jevons paradox problem of this, which we love talking about because it's such a fascinating
just a fact. I guess
it's just a principle, which, just to recap, it's kind of the idea that, like, let's say a city has a traffic problem because there's too many cars. So they add more lanes to, the major highway coming into the city or something, to free up space. More lanes, more space, right? Except once they free up that space, it becomes easier to travel on that highway. And so more people start taking that highway, and now it's jammed up again, right?
But there's an important nuance with the Jevons paradox, right? It's about the idea that if you make something more efficient to accomplish a specific goal related to throughput, right? Or to speed or whatever, that there's a good chance that you might accomplish some other goal, right? But that you actually just end up back where you were or make it even worse. And so
it's that you will never reduce the amount that something is used by making it easier to use.
Yeah. But having it but having it get used more might be the outcome you want, right? Because if your goal is to like reduce traffic congestion, you can't. That's the Jevons paradox. Like, you can't do it, basically.
You can't do it by adding lanes.
You can't do it by adding lanes, but you can get more total cars to move through over the same period of time. So if your goal is just to have more traffic able to use the roads, then you still get that outcome, right? So,
but now, and of course, you would never use public transportation because what the fuck is that even?
Well, I guess the general
who
point
uses that?
A lot of times, the best solutions for these problems are not by just increasing the throughput of what you're already doing, but moving laterally to find another way.
Yeah, if you want people to use something less or do something less, then you provide a fully different alternative. That's even easier, right? Because people follow the path of least resistance. So the thing about this video stuff is it's incredibly energy intensive to make like 5 seconds of video. So like like Adam, you were saying it's something like running a microwave for an hour.
Yeah, somebody put that setup. I don't know how they would have that, you know?
Yeah, we'll fact check that.
Well, I think that's the thing with these
But I mean,
claims
point
is
being
they're-
like, it is going to be expensive as fuck.
Yeah, it definitely
You
is.
know.
We know that. We just don't know what it actually means for it to be expensive.
Yeah. And so if you're looking at it as in sort of like basic terms, you'd say, well, here's a shot that is insane, that has like all this cinematography in it. It's got like amazing lighting. It's got like 100 people, and it's clearly has all kinds of special effects going on. So if I wanted to actually get that shot in real life, I would need a crew. I would need fuckloads of money. I would need to bus people in. I have to pay
You need
extras.
to do a lot more than run a microwave for an hour.
Yeah, like the energy cost of getting that shot conventionally is orders of magnitude higher than generating it with AI, right? So it's like, oh, it's a savings. However,
Jevons
now
strikes.
Jevons paradox comes in and says, well, now any schmuck with a keyboard and a $500 credit card limit can get a subscription to this thing and generate videos all day long.
Because you're not making it more efficient to make only the videos that would have been made already, right?
Correct.
You're now making it possible for videos to be made that never would have been. And that is the dominant. So it's the same thing with like all the LLM shit on the internet right now, right? It's that stuff wasn't going to exist. It wasn't going to be there, right? If it wasn't for LLMs making it possible just to churn it out endlessly, you know, it just wasn't going to be there, right? So the outcome wasn't that LLMs made it so that now, you know, bloggers can write more efficiently or whatever. It was that now people who are writing real stuff are overwhelmed by the fake stuff. So
yeah, and also people who couldn't write well or who couldn't be bothered to write or whatever, or just people who are starting up troll farms, you know, bot farms. Like now they can just do it at a scale dramatically higher than they ever could before. You know, like it's a gift to propagandists everywhere because now they don't even have to hire people to make this shit. They can have 1/100th the number of people just slapping LLMs.
But
around,
it's going to the most like optimistic case that I think you're kind of getting at, which is like, okay, yeah, so now anybody could just use a text prompt to generate this, you know, some kind of more cinematic quality, like a couple seconds of video. Because usually the argument you see for this is the same what you've seen for like game development, right? Back in the 2010s with all the engines coming out and stuff. There's always a pushback when typically when like a creative field in particular opens up a bunch, right? Where suddenly with some additional tooling, whatever else, it just becomes much easier to actually get your foot in the door and start producing your own stuff. And so what I think is interesting and feels different about this is that difference in like the consumption aspect of it from whether it's like energy usage or whatever else. And then also the sort of the lack of specificity on what kind of things being produced, because video is consumed for like all sorts of reasons, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not like a video game that you're going to like, you know, sell in a store.
You can make videos about
exactly
anything.
Yeah. And so I think what gets really weird about it in this space then is the fact that like, yeah, this doesn't mean that anybody with a dream, you know, quote unquote, to make some quote unquote creative endeavor, right, can do that using something like this. But that's not like there's no constraints on it in a way that makes it both like broadly economically
so we
good.
We use Game Maker, which is an easy to use game engine that still requires a fuckload of programming and expertise and skill and taste, and we have to make mountains of decisions to put a game together. And it is insanely easy compared to
what it was
if we didn't have it, where we would have to make our own engine, and then if we wanted to port it to other platforms, we would have had to, you know, somehow rewrite the game for a different platform. So
we're able to take Copilot, right, to help with some.
Well, we did.
To assist with some of the coding.
Yeah. So there's all these tools that like still they augment our ability to deploy our expertise, right?
Yes.
And what we're seeing now is kind of a different type of a thing, which is
the ability to not have expertise.
Yeah, the tool is the expert at making cinematic shots or whatever, and you can just show up and just have the outcome, which it's doing a lot of weird things in like education and in film now, in books, in everything, where it really is just a tragedy of the commons, right? Of
course.
If everybody can make Hollywood level like videos and cinematics and stuff like that, then they don't have any value at all, right? Like you could see shit now already because if you just go to YouTube and you just type VO3, you'll just see hundreds of videos now that look amazing. And like, yeah, sure, they've got a little bit of jank in them, but visually they are just so far above and beyond anything anybody could do without a huge team until now, right? And so what's it going to be like when the shit that just the regular shit that you see on YouTube looks as good as stuff that you would go to the movie theater to see?
Well, it'll only be a subset. It'll only be the fake stuff that looks that good, right?
Yeah. But even like if you're just like if you're a YouTuber and you're putting together, maybe you're like a talking head channel, where you just kind of talk about the news of the day or whatever, right? The idea that you could like take your video or take what you've made with your basic shot, like just in a regular room or whatever, as an input and just make it look way better, by running it through these different AI things or, like, I guess my point being, even the real stuff is probably not going to be real for long.
Not all real,
because you're gonna if you're a regular person on YouTube just using a camera or whatever, like you're going to be competing with all this shit.
Yeah, I guess when it comes down to music, it feels like that sort of thing where it's like you can't. It'd be hard to blame a person for participating, for using one of these things to try to do something that they want to do. Do you know what I mean? Because it's like, that's
the tragedy of the commons. Like, like on your own, you're not gonna sink the whole industry by making a video.
And even like, and there's always that thing of like, well, I'm using it fine. Like I'm using it in a way that it just augments what I'm doing. Right.
Well, and you can justify being like, if I didn't use this tool, I literally wouldn't have the resources to make my vision come to life.
And so, but the thing is like, it's not really, it's like that you can have the two truth problem, right? Which is like, that can be true. There can all be
two things can be true at the same time.
We drink at the same time. And you can also have the fact that it opens up the ability for anybody to make any heinous thing they want, basically at scale. And
or any good thing. Because again, the good stuff is stuff that you're competing with, and the outrage farming and the rage bait stuff you're also competing with. I mean, it's it's still the case that these tools are good at making what I would just call nuggets. Like it can make a little video nugget. It can't make a film, like a feature length film yet. Right. That's and the constraints of the way that these tools work are such that something big is going to have to change in them or some other thing entirely will have to come up to make that
more possible.
Yeah, well, so that you can type in a prompt and get a 90-minute film.
Yeah, there's no path forward currently. Nobody has laid out like, here's how we get from getting better and better and better at generating,
clips,
few
short context-free clips.
Yeah, we can get better, but that's how these things work. As they get bigger, they get better at doing that, right? But the resource consumption to do it just scales with. It scales with the quality and duration and all this kind of stuff, right? And so if we're making a 90-minute film, right? If you do it in one go, I guess that's like leaving your microwave running for 100 years or whatever, right? Yeah. But you're not going to do it in one go, right? You're going to do it because like that's not how.
Yeah, you're going to do it shot by shot, and you would regenerate shots.
Because the core thing with all of these is that they're non-fucking specific, and it's the part that drives me batshit when people are talking about them, right? It's like, if you just need a video of a man with a beard, right, sitting on a dock telling a fisherman story or whatever, if you need that, and that's as specific as you need it, hell yeah, you could generate like something so real that I could be convinced that that's your grandpa or whatever, right? Like, that's true. But if you're like, there's a movie I want to make, it has like this collection of characters, it has this overarching story, and by the time you've like figured all of that out, first, you can't articulate it in a way that is specific enough for you to get the output that it matches your vision.
Yes.
You can't. That's why these jobs exist of like a person moves a camera to a very specific location, gets the lighting in a very specific way with a whole team of people, and the boom mic goes into a certain spot so that you catch the right vibe at the right time, and you have the Foley artists afterwards who are like slapping meat against the wall or whatever to like get exactly the right vibe.
Yeah, but here's the thing though, Adam, because like at the end of the day, people chase the dollars, right? Yeah. And so like
they do, but I just don't believe. I think it's bullshit that like this is going to replace well-made content.
Oh yeah, I'm saying it doesn't have to.
Yeah,
because nobody gives a shit. Nobody gives a shit about well-made content.
That's not true.
Because
that's not true.
Well, no,
people like well-made content.
I'm saying like if people want to spend 6, 8, 10, 12 hours a day on TikTok watching 5-second videos, which they do, then people don't need to make movies with this stuff for it to absolutely take over everything.
Right. And that's true in these very specific domains, right? As in like a domain that already is doing the same thing. Because like TikTok is already a bunch of random shit of extremely varying quality that's mostly lies, right? That's because that's what social media is, right? It's already that.
TikTok is vibes. It's just, you don't even remember what you fucking looked at.
We're not replacing feature-length films with.
But if you're a studio executive,
5-second clips.
Vibe coding. Yeah.
If you're a studio executive with an MBA,
you're an idiot, and you're going to try to do it, and it's going to fail.
You're going to try to do it,
and you're going to have a bill from OpenAI or I guess Google that's like $1 million for the first week.
Pennies compared to how much it normally costs.
Yeah, but pennies. You spent pennies to make garbage, right? So then, like,
yeah. Well, that's how they normally do it anyway.
I agree with you. People are going to try to do it, but I just don't. And the spaces that already are.
All I'm saying is like, because right now, like we're talking about the state that this thing is currently in, and it might be 5 more years of work before any kind of a breakthrough makes it possible to make a 2-minute video or something. But there are so many people who are trying to solve this problem. Like somebody's going to crack it.
Maybe if it's crackable. Not everything is solvable. Like cold fusion, still don't fucking have it, right? It's been 10 years away for 100 years, right? Like there are, because the thing is, there's a physical reality.
But how many people are working on that compared to this? Because like every fucking investment dollar that's available is just being sucked up by AI.
And they still haven't done it.
Yeah, this one thing is that I want to get at, which is that there's a weird thing that also like a knock-on effect that I don't see people really talking about here. But like, if you think about what goes into right now making a really good, like let's say you're a YouTuber, you want to make a good video, right? Or you do have like a small team, you got some success. There's a large economical output from you to be able to make that video to a wide diversity of characters in the economy, right? So you've bought equipment, right? So there's equipment manufacturers, you've got software that you're using to do editing, to do compositing, whatever. You
get your crew.
Yeah, you got your crew. You're paying to do all sorts of other stuff related to that. There's a whole little, microeconomy associated with that. And what's the thing that I don't see mentioned too much is like the reality of the collapse of that in the case of it being able to be all absorbed sort of like into something like, AI generated spaces where like, it's not like all of the money just goes.
Well, this is the model of choke point capitalism, right? Yeah. It's like basically, like I've kind of talked about this in some of our previous AI discussions, but like the reason that so many companies and people are throwing hundreds of billions of dollars into AI is because the holy grail of this thing is to make a tool that can replace entire teams of hundreds of experts so that you are now the one that everybody has to go to get something done, right? So if
all that money just gets funneled to you, right?
Yeah. So imagine just hypothetically, some company figures out how to make a humanoid robot that can think like a person and works exactly like a person does, right? But it's a robot, and they can just make a bunch of them, and you can probably not buy one, maybe rent one for your home
it's
or whatever,
Absolutely.
It'll be a subscription service.
It'll be a subscription service.
And so it's like, all right, well, if you need a plumber, do you hire the union plumber who's going to cost you this much and blah, blah, blah? Or, do you just pay like $10 and this fucking company sends a robot to your house real quick?
Or at this point, you don't have a choice because you don't have a job. And so you have to.
Yeah. Well, that's the problem. Yeah. Cause like it's just removing more and more people from the equation on all sides until eventually there's just like one company who controls all the capital and all the labor. Because the labor is now robots, right?
I was watching Andor this past week, which was great. And I had this really funny thing because like all the tech that's visible in the Star Wars universe is very analog. And a lot of it's because of the time it was made, right?
Yeah. Because they're trying to match it with like the original. So it's 70s, the 70s vision of sci-fi.
Yeah, it's like, who's making all these
without
droids?
CG,
I don't know.
right?
They're just
which still has like there's like dials. There's like dials and buttons fucking.
I love it.
everywhere.
Yeah,
there's
it's
like
such a good
no
aesthetic.
touch screen. It's great. And so
and sentient robots.
yeah, and then sentient robots. But I think what was interesting about it is I was thinking about it and I was like, it might just be the case that you sort of circle back to it because of all these problems, which is like if it requires a human hand, you know what I mean, like a physical.
This is what
hand,
Battlestar Galactica is about.
Yeah, to do the thing as opposed to like letting there's no networked shit. There's no robot that can
computers.
just flip a digit. It's like it all kind of circles back to really crunchy analog shit, right? Where it's like Polaroids. It's because it's a real photo that happened. It's it's all this other stuff that gets kind of fun.
Well, I mean, this is the natural consequence of our collective agreement as a society that the most important thing for anybody to have or control is money. Right. So everything that we do is orchestrated around we as participants in the labor force, right? Like we're always trying to find ways to scrape a little bit of money out of the system so we can have it, so we can keep going. Right. But there are people who have insane amounts of resources they're not scraping little bits of money out. They've created like a black hole, that just is constantly sucking the money away from everybody else.
Spooky earth miners that's got like that giant, like 80-foot saw blade on it. They're just, moving it out. Yeah.
And it kind of makes me think of like GDP, right? Which GDP is the mechanism. It's like the KPI that we often talk about as determining how powerful a country is or how successful a country is, how well they're doing, But at the end of the day, it only captures money, how much money is moving around and how fast it's moving around.
Yeah, not who has. This is why distribution's like
not who has it and not what it's being used for. So for example, like if I made a company that shits in people's soup and I have 20,000 employees just going around, we just go around to restaurants and we're like, hey, Steve here is going to shit in your soup unless you give him $100, right?
Shake that. I like this. It's good.
Yeah, and this is health insurance, right? So you give Steve $100 and he's not going to shit in your soup and you can carry on with your meal. I'm a job creator. we have GDP, like that's economic activity. And as far as the GDP measurement is concerned, that's a positive for society.
Meanwhile, everyone's trying to avoid getting shit in their soup.
Yeah. And so this is the in-shitification, right? Of everything. It's all about it's not about making things better. It's about getting more money out of everybody around you. And we're just kind of
making them worse. It's like specifically about making them worse to extract more.
Yeah. And so if the consequence of your actions is that people die or they have shit in their soup or they can't enjoy life anymore, but money changed hands, then
to you,
that's good.
Also, in the case of, So I think
then that's GDP.
The overall arc of this thing just doesn't. We're clearly headed into just like the weirdest fucking place. You know what I mean? Especially with the video stuff that we've talked about, as far as again anybody just generating just mountains of totally real looking whatever they want, putting it on consumption platforms that are currently totally dominant in terms of how people spend their time and mind space. And it's just like, where's this going, folks? Where's it going? Because it does look. And
there's that saying like, it's like something that can't go on forever won't, right? So that's like we're on a path here of a whole fuckload of unsustainable things. And more and more, like as every year goes by, it feels more and more like we are getting real close to the end of that path. And we don't really know. We're living on borrowed time. Yep. Yeah, we don't really know what's at the end or what's beyond the end. But
we're running on optimism fumes, So But we were talking about this too. It's like, and you can see this so clearly with stuff that's a lot simpler when you like watch it happen. Like tariffs being announced, stock market falls. Tariffs happening, stock market falls. Right. Specific tariffs being slightly lifted,
slightly scaled back.
Stock market rallies, right? Like
we're completely rallies. As if nothing happened.
Yeah, we're in a much worse place than we were from an economic standpoint, right? But
because it's the copium, it's just people just like it'll probably be fine, right?
Fucking everything is basically running on grifter vibes right now, all of it, right? And so
as long as we can stay confident, it'll keep going.
Yeah, it's
just believe, It's
just a big confidence game. So yeah, it's gonna get fucking weird.
It's just so weird.
So here's the thing. I don't have any optimistic like message about this because there's really no way to predict what the fuck is coming. Like you can get a general sort of ballpark about certain things that are coming, but they all interact. It's an end body problem. Like you don't know what we can't predict what things are going to look like a year from now, even in terms of like any specific industry. Like we don't know how this stuff is going to start creeping into the games industry. We also don't know if, next month some fucking super crazy video game generating AI tool gets revealed that fucking sucks, but still makes games. And then suddenly, suddenly now we got to deal with that.
We do have, I think there's I think Roblox is like, every time I see a Roblox anything, I get mad because I look at it and it looks like
because
shit.
Their eyes are too high on their heads.
It looks like shit. And it's just kids making games, which is cool. But then their labor is being exploited, which is a lot less cool.
That's less cool. Yeah.
But the fact that like this is the environment that like kids are like learning, where they're basically learning how to appreciate things like art and creation and like this kind of stuff, right? The fact that it's happening in that space just makes me so mad. Because
you can't just make art. It's got to be you got to make money off of it.
Yeah, you got to make money off of it, and it's all in the same. There's just
so somebody else can make money off your money,
a lot more than you did. So it's like you're being pre-trained into the worst parts of enshittified capitalism, right? Like from the beginning, but also in this extremely homogenized environment where like it's all looks the same, right? And because if you think about when we were growing up, it's like you would go, we're being old men yelling at clouds right now, right? But like
100%.
We should be yelling at the cloud.
Yeah, you should be. But like you get like we have like your Nintendo console, and you go look at the all the different cassettes that you can shove in there at the store, right? And they all look completely different. Sure, you got your franchises, right? But there's like huge variety of stuff. Each one is a completely different kind of experience.
And you can't look at reviews because there's no way to do that.
Yeah. But you get to develop taste by having this huge variety of things and it wasn't that all the stuff was good back then, right? But it was varying levels of good and extremely just different experientially. So you got to like develop taste, get a sense of like the variety of how things can be and all this kind of stuff, right? And we're just getting into this like increasingly homogenized, like everything feels like LLM output. Like Roblox feels like LLM output. Like it all, the whole internet is like videos are like everything. Because
it's all coming through the same pipeline. It's all going through the same tubes, Yeah.
That's
weird. So I mean, we'll keep an eye on it, but I mean, going forward, we might want to scale back on your consumption of video or just internet stuff.
Find stuff made by people. Be a person. Make stuff, right? Yep. Find stuff made by other people. Like consume that stuff.
Good luck with that.
Yeah,
but
meet people as to
try it.
I have been spending more time over the past like 6 months accumulating like bespoke random blogs into my RSS reader. It's like it's getting fairly esoteric and random at this point, but I get this big satisfaction if I go interact with any of the major sort of centralizers of bullshit, any of the social media platforms, the video platforms.
Centralizers of bullshit.
Then it's just, I'm being sold stuff all the time and I'm being advertised to all the time. And all of it feels fake all the time, And just seeing real people say stuff, even when I don't care about it, has been this huge.
It's refreshing.
It's very refreshing.
when you know that they're real, right? It's somehow it does make a difference, right?
Yeah, like this person's an idiot and they're wrong about everything, and also they're making me mad. But at least they've got a brain in their head. And
it's a real person making me mad. But they're not trying to make me mad. They're just wrong about something, which is a different fucking thing.
Which is different than an unfeeling machine that doesn't give a fuck about anything. And
or
it's
a
just
grifter.
Barfing.
Yeah, or a grifter who's very specifically cares about trying to make money by making me mad, right? Like
it's weird space.
Yeah, but I think that the social media space, like Blue Sky, comes the closest to that, except it's, covered in LLMs. Fake people just talking about fake stuff. Yep. And so it's still, the incentive structure has been removed currently from that platform of doing all the horrible stuff, but people still do it because for some reason people just like turning loose LLMs.
You got to do it. You got
to do it. So this whole I am finding this like bespoke curation of like small communities. Stuff I know definitely was made by people. Like all this kind of stuff is like, I'm feeling that vibe increasing.
Or even just, God forbid, go out in the real world. and
Whoa.
go
real
sit
lives?
with people.
Yeah, it's pretty analog.
Yeah. Real analog.
Yeah.
Yeah, you might get a disease, but that's just the risk you got to take.
You know what robots can't do?
Drink
Give
coffee.
you COVID.
Disease. Well, I mean, we're not going to worry about them giving you stuff, but they can't get it. You know what I mean? That's the proof.
Yeah.
Can you get ill?
They can't relate to the human experience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, that's like the
Anyways.
ultimate. It's like, not to add another downer, but that's like, it's the ultimate bullshit. The whole thing is like, yeah, we could go outside, except our public health system is being fucked.
Okay, I'm tired. Right?
So now you can't even go outside without getting a disease. And then you can't get medical care if you do.
Everything is garbage inside and outside, but let's just focus on the inside for now.
Yeah.
Let's get a question. We got time for one question.
Else.
So this question comes from Jumpylumpa Leapylow, Degeki, who's I think was also our previous question on the previous episode.
Degeki killing it.
Monopolizing it.
Degeki said, you grew up together for almost 10 years, and for almost 10 years, you brothers, Adam slightly less, have worked together. I don't know. Probably because Adam stopped making the games directly is probably why.
Well, no, because you guys started before I did, so.
True. I assume mostly virtually these days. Between growing up and working together, I'll take a chance and assume you were in contact somewhat regularly. Listening to you all here, admittedly a short and purposeful sample segment, it sounds like you all get along well. What would you say has been or is your key to getting along? Inquiring dads with multiple children want to know.
I'm going to just quickly say he had the word purposeful in there. It's not accurate. I'm just going to throw that out there.
We don't know what the fuck
the
we're doing
podcast.
here.
Literally, we sit down. We're like, okay, what should we talk
What
about?
do we talk about?
Spitball some ideas, and we're like, and then we get tired of not already having started because we got work to do. So then we just start, and we have nothing that's happening like between us is. It's not performative in a meaningful way. Like it is in the sense that like we know there's an audience here. So we're kind of like half talking to each other and half talking to the audience in terms of like who we feel like we're talking to. Right. So it's a little weird from that standpoint, but it's not actually performative. Right. We censor what we say with respect to trade secrets and like stuff we want to announce, but not otherwise. So like, this is how we talk about stuff. These are our real opinions, and this is how
We're not good at acting.
No, but this is how we interact with each other, actually. Again, mostly because we're not normally interacting with each other with like somebody watching because that's a different kind of a thing, But
yeah, I think a lot of the like hangout, just being able to hang out with each other comes down to just being, I think just like, I don't know, each person is their own person, like has their own personality, has their own little quirks or whatever else, right? I think if you get to a spot with, especially with people who are like anchored in your life, where you recognize their wholeness as a person, and you quit being mad about like, I don't know, the specifics. Does that make sense? Like the differences between yourself. Like you have the same differences.
Who people are and take it as like a kind of collection.
Let
of
it
facts.
be cool. Let it be cool that's who they are, right? If you as much as you can, and
assuming it's non-harmful, right? Because there's also like. Because the fact is that most differences between people that you don't like are just actually non-harmful, right?
Yeah.
But there are harmful ones, and you don't need to make room for that shit, right? But we're all lucky that none of us are pieces of shit, so that we don't have to be like, I guess I accept you as a piece of shit, and we try to move forward with that.
Yeah, right. I think we have a lot of open. We have very easy, I guess probably among the easiest, I would guess, like just communication with each other about actual problems we have with each other. With regards to work in particular, because that's like the usual space we are interacting through these days. But like even in the past, we didn't really fight a lot after kind of the early years, and but it wasn't because we weren't interacting. I mean, that's like one way to not fight. It's just like be siloed. Right? But most of the interaction space we had just didn't have a lot of conflict in it, and I'm not sure. I'm not certain exactly why that is, aside from just having enough base personality alignment, if that makes sense, or like values alignment because of how we were raised.
I think it does come down to values.
Yeah, there's not like deep points of chafing against one another about like what it is that you want to do with your time, or like how it is that you are in the world, or what you value in the world. Does that make sense?
There are lots of shallow ones, of course, because
because
we're all different people. Yeah, but nothing is there aren't any like fundamental like differences in morals or ethics or general sense of what the world is and that kind of stuff, right? And again, there are lots of little and sometimes bigger differences, but they don't go all the way down to the level where it's basically relationship breaking, right? And I think a lot of it is that we've all learned over the years to because there's an aspect that you were saying of like trying to just to kind of figure out who a person is and not worry about it. But I think the other kind of lens on that is not trying to control it, right? Because I think that's where most of any kind of relationship, I think that's where most of the conflict is somebody's like mad about how a person is in some way and wants/needs them to be a different way along that dimension, and is then chafing against that and constantly trying to make it happen, right? And again, there's a lot of nuance here because sometimes the way a person is being is creating a problem and needs to be addressed, right?
Well, but oftentimes, like the reality of a person is that the reasons why you might like them or their strongest, like their strongest points are also the things, if you invert it, that are problematic, almost like to a T, right? So it's like, and this is the joke with like art people in general. But like you're really being more far afield and being more creative or whatever else. Everyone's like, oh yeah, we love it in like certain contexts, but then it's like fucking annoying when the person's like late to everything, when the person like is disorganized or like staring out the window because they're not
too free spirited.
Exactly. It's like, you have to recognize like for any given person, the context you're in with them may or may not be better suited to whatever their particular strengths are, maybe showing some of those chafing points. And when you're in a very long-term relationship with people, I think the thing to guard against is basically, how to put it, it's like basically to me, it's losing perspective on the value of that person's strengths, given that basically especially in a working relationship, we are very consistent about delivering on our strengths, right? For each other, for the studio. And so I think it's very easy then to enter into space where maybe you kind of forget that that's happening, if that makes sense. Like it's sort of taken as a given. And then you don't recognize that any of the chafing that you're experiencing maybe with a person in a particular context is just like the result. It's like you can't have the first part without also having some of the second part. Does that make sense?
It's a complete person.
Yeah.
So if somebody has I know for me personally, I get pretty like hyper fixated on certain things, but uncontrollably. Mm-hmm. So like sometimes I'm really not into something and it's really hard for me to like make progress on it or whatever without like roping somebody else in and being like, help me get unstuck here, which could be annoying for other people. Mm-hmm. Right. But then sometimes, again, uncontrollably, there'll be something that I'll be like, I got to do this thing. Yeah. And then I'm just fucking doing it. And even if it's like over the weekend or whatever. And that can be good and also bad, depending on what it is that I'm doing, Right. But on the whole, that weird thing about my brain, we've been able to use that to our benefit as a studio.
Yeah, because the focus is on adaptation first rather than compromise first, right? Because what people are constantly saying for relationships is like, oh yeah, you got to find your points of compromise, right? And there's again, this is all nuance, right? There's truth to that, but I think the first goal that at least I personally have, and I think we have done a good job of in the studio, is first going with adaptation. Just being like, as long as we can assume a few things, like we're here to work, we're equal partners in this endeavor, we're putting equal energy into it, and we're all trying to get better at what we do, right? As long as like that core part stays true, which is basically a values kind of a thing, right? And alignment. As long as that part is true, then there's a million details of like how that actually looks. And now personality gets involved, the way that our brains work gets involved, our constraints on our time get involved because, say I'm having new kids, me and Seth not having kids, right? All these things dramatically shift what it means to be one of the individual people involved. And if we go for, again, if the focus is like, can I just adapt? Like, can I adapt to the fact that like Sam's life is extremely chaotic because he's got kids, right?
Yeah, it's like
the answer is yes.
I just started the podcast like half an hour late today. Yeah. I got some sick babies I had to take care of, right? So it's like, I sent a message and I feel bad about it because I'm like, I know, that it's a plan. It is a plan on the calendar, right? But it is true also that like, if it has to become like a hugely stressful deal for me to be like very specifically on time so that everybody else can do exactly what they're doing at exactly the time, then like that's really that's very hard and large ask at this particular point in my life.
Well, there's a choice to be made here as well, like on Adam's and my side, right? Because we could be pissed off about it.
Oh, 100%.
But
and you'd have something to point to that's like very clear, right? Like a 30 minutes.
Well, yeah, sure, but not really, because like you're not deciding to be late. It's something that's just happening, and you're doing your best to control it or mitigate it. And It's just something that's happening. So there's nothing. It's like the weather, right?
Yeah.
Like you can be mad that it's raining, but
yeah, it's a good faith bit, right? And the nuance there is also really interesting, right? Because it's like you're saying, we know that Sam isn't choosing that. That's a thing that's happening. But we also know that there are different ways that Sam can react to and attempt to mitigate it. And as long as what we see is like, oh yeah, Sam's making his best effort to like to have this stuff work at all, right? In a way that like makes sense. Like,
yeah, but
then I'm like, I can adapt to the chaos. It's like, it's manageable because I know that everyone is all in doing their best. It's when people are not clearly doing their best, right? Or where it feels like they're not aligned, right? Then
again, like there's always a conversation to be had. Like why? Like why would somebody not be doing their best? And it's not assuming that they're like taking advantage of you or that they don't give a shit or whatever. It's like, all right, let's talk about what's going on with you to figure out what you need.
Well, but when I say doing your best, I don't mean doing the best you can do in a vacuum either. I mean like doing the best with the current context, right?
Yeah, so, but also to kind of hit Degeki's question about like from like a parenting perspective. To me, I think the thing that kind of is the thread that unites all three of us is that we're always questioning everything.
Yeah,
and this is something that came
annoyingly
up.
so sometimes, but you know,
this is something that we were taught from a very early age. Of our parents did a pretty dang good job of not telling us stuff and instead asking us stuff. So, they would tell us eventually, right? But it was always like we'd see something and we'd be like, why is this like this? And they'd be like, well, what do you think? Like, why do you think it is like that? And they would like just always make us think through stuff and try to figure it out ourselves before, handing us the answer, which means that I think one of the things you'll come across when people say like, oh yeah, like don't work with family, bleh, right? I think that's bullshit. I think it's really just don't work with people who have a hard time thinking through things.
Yeah, because it's the absence of self-righteousness, right? Because, which is, as you're saying, is basically like that's what happens when you have a sort of non-changing worldview, right? Where you've just decided, I know how people are supposed to be. I know how the
you
world
haven't even decided.
Works.
You just operating on vibes.
You just know. Well, the thing is, you just know, right? And there's no room for that. And that's also the kind of person who says like, who gets really mad when somebody else isn't behaving the way that they're supposed to, quote unquote, right? Because it's a collection of rules you've adopted in your worldview, and you treat them as facts self-righteously, right? And like that is the thing that makes a person impossible to work with.
Yeah, there's like a lack of bending about that. Because like if you're right, is everybody, you do still have all those mental models, right? Where it's like, oh, yeah,
absolutely,
something might, and that's where all the achieving comes from, right? Like, oh, why didn't you take care of this? What the fuck? Like, why didn't you do it this way? Or whatever, any work handoff, there's always like all this stuff that's happening, like with the transference there. But I think it's the question of whether or not you are basically can talk about it, or if it's just
or if it's just blame.
You're wrong now.
Or whether does everything end in we'll have to agree to disagree,
Yeah. Oh my God.
Which thing is like we never do that.
No, we never do that.
We talk through stuff until like, and it isn't to say that we end up always agreeing, but if the
goal is
way that you,
I gotta put it, the goal isn't agreeing on on one of the two positions that was entered into with like at the start. Does that make sense?
The goal is understanding.
Yeah,
it's trying to understand like if we're disagreeing, I want to know why you are at the position you're at, but also I want you to help me figure out how I got to where I'm at. Because if I say like if I have a feeling that somebody challenging one of my opinions is a personal attack that needs to be defended at all costs, then nobody can fucking work with me because I can't change. I can't get new ideas in. And if the person I'm working with is the same, then we just end up screaming at each other a bunch. And then we're both pissed off, and then we haven't. And so it really comes down to this idea that if you're raising kids, if you really focus on this idea of like trying to get them to think critically about literally everything, the downside is it's fucking annoying as a parent to have kids that question everything.
Oh yeah, and depending on the kid, it's like because my default is if someone tells me a piece of information that I haven't basically if someone says I'm doing something wrong, or like, hey, you should do it this way. My assumption actually baseline is that they're first is actually that they're correct. The thing I've had to work on over time is like, and I'll have an emotional reaction to that. We've talked about in many, many episodes ago, like all the work I've done to be able to absorb feedback more easily. But a lot of it is because it feels correct to me, baseline, which is, I know, is a personality thing. Cause like my wife does not have the same issue at all. Like she's, she'll actually, critically think through whatever the piece of feedback is someone gives before she has any reaction to it.
Yeah, it's neither correct nor incorrect. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, it's my default position on everything that anybody that I read, that I see that anybody says is what I call it skepticism, but people think that means I don't believe it. But it's that I haven't adopted a belief yet. I'm just...
Yeah, you actually are going to think about it first.
I'm going to evaluate it and try to decide.
So it's true that you don't believe it, but it's also true that you don't disbelieve it because you have no opinion about it because it's new information.
Yeah. So depending on the kid then, so in my case then, what that meant because of the combo was actually that it was very easy for me to be taken advantage of, actually, sort of in my early years, because my default was believing that whatever the thing that another person said was like more valuable than whatever it was that I ever thought about that thing, right? Does that make sense? Like their emotional state or their understanding of a thing was true, sort of like baseline, because I was always willing to say that was the case, which is, again, like that's not, so that's where all the nuance about this comes in. It's like, depending on personality type, of course, like you need to make sure that people are able to pause and like think through critically whatever they're, receiving from other people in these contexts. But it is about just being able to receive and think about things that other people are giving you, and identifying those people then that you can actually form a team with. And a team being a thing where it's like, it's no longer about a particular person's, mode of doing a thing, but like, how do we collectively turn into a little super organism, right? What is our goal here? What are we doing here? Like that getting it into that space where you recognize that all the arguments, all of the ideas people are coming in with are not, how to put it? It's like, they're not the answer. They're like a piece of food for the superorganism to digest and like put together its own thing, put together its own result for.
Like there was somebody in the Discord server the other day, they were talking about something in Crashlands 2. I can't remember what it was, but they were like, whose idea was this to do blah? Mm-hmm. I thought about it for a moment and I was like, I don't fucking know. But like I definitely was involved in it, and I definitely did big. Yeah, not really. I mean,
but it's like LLM shit though, right? In the sense that like, because there's one thing I remember was my initial idea, which was the way that roofs fly off, right? Mm. I remember that specifically because so few of my specific ideas have ever done anything in the game because it's not my job, right? Mm. It's like that one I remember, except none of the details about like what it actually looks like, how it works. Like, yeah. So it was like, for me, I was like, I wrote
Adam's
the prompt, which was, it would be cool if the roof exploded off, was basically what I said.
Yeah, because originally it just disappeared. It just was.
Yeah, and I was like, that's not very satisfying. Like, can we just have it like kind of fly off, And then all the actual work happened of like figuring out what that actually means and how that works and so on, right? And
that's largely Seth doing the program to be like, well, let's suck this roof off of here visually, but then there's feedback coming from me about it.
And then showing it to Sam, showing it to Adam, being like, is this cool? And they'd be like, what if we did it? What if we changed this like this? And I'd be like, how about this though too?
Yeah,
and basically everything that the studio does and the stuff that we make, every detail in the game is going to be some combination of like, somebody's basically put out a prompt, right? And then a discussion ensued, and then something came out of it, right? But often that prompt is just, I don't feel like this part is good. It's not even an idea. It's just like a diagnosis of something not being quite right. And it's impossible to trace like, okay, whose was this then? The answer is always it's everybody's, right? And I think that's the other part too, is that alignment is so key. The good faith is so key, and treating these things the same way, that like, this is a collaboration. It's not specifically about credit, all that kind of stuff. If you take any one of these points of alignment on our overall morals and ethics, on the goals of the studio, on our approach to the work, on wanting to be equal partners, like if we took away any one of those, we couldn't work together. Yeah. It'll be impossible. And we might find a way to get that alignment back. And every once in a while, like we get a little out of alignment along some dimension, and then we get it back, right? But at any given point, there could come a time where for some reason, something causes us to get out of alignment in a way we can't address. And at that point,
the thing is, I guess the difference is that we talk about that fact. We're aware of that fact.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? It's not
Yeah. We're aware of it, but it still could mean that we get to the point where we can't get aligned.
Yeah.
But we would know it. We would know that that's happening. We would talk about it. discover that we can't get aligned and be like, okay, well, what does this mean? Right. And we would still find a way to move forward as within our own relationships. Right. Even if that meant for the purposes of like making the studio work, we'd be like, well, shit, I guess that means we have to
Change
split up
up
the
the
band,
songs.
you know, or whatever, or change something. And it's that awareness of it and treating this all as in good faith again. Because even if like that happened because somebody's life changed in some way that meant like they just needed something different and couldn't maintain alignment with how we were running the business, right? Then like I wouldn't treat that as like, oh, I'm mad at you now for doing this, right? I'd be like, okay, well, shit, is there a way for us to get alignment? And if not, then I guess we'll find a way to like navigate the new world, right?
Yeah, it's still treated as a collaborative problem-solving thing, right? Which I think is kind of the difference. And maybe that's probably the thing that if that ever fell out, that would be like the actual problem, like the real problem, which is if it felt like someone was just like, I'm done, you know, like, and not in a way that, again, not in a way where it's like, I need to exit for X purpose. Here's how we can let's figure out how to
basically stop
like,
showing up.
I'm done. And like we're just not participating in the conversation anymore. You know, that's like, they always talk about this in the case of, I don't know, in relationships and stuff. It's like someone being indifferent to the relationships problems is in so many ways worse than them like having a negative, like being mad about stuff or like, because being engaged, if someone's disengaged, right, from the whole process, that's where it gets really fucking just uncomfortable. It's just
or someone becomes particularly hostile or particularly close-minded about their worldview, so they become self-righteous, right? Like there are all these things that, and again, nobody can guarantee this won't happen to us either, right? Like these are things these are things that happen, right? So in a lot of ways, we're just fortunate that we ended up with, and for the reasons that we talked about, and probably a lot more we don't know of, you know, we ended up really alignable. It's not even that we ended up aligned because we had to come into full alignment over time, right? So we ended up being alignable along all these things. And so far, no one has like ended up in a situation or created a situation where we couldn't stay that way.
I think a big part of it is, I mean, and for me, it's on the perspective side, is that I recognize that it's such a rare and fun thing to be able to do this together. And so, you know, whether it was the cancer stuff or whatever else, it's always felt to me like it's always borrowed time in a way where it's like, as long as we can keep this fucking thing going, let's keep it going because it's so cool. But like the fact that we can do it at all, and now it's been like fucking 12 years, is insane. Both the combo of the industry that we're in, right? But also
I mean, in particular because of that part.
Yeah, so it's like just being able to just doing both those things together is insane. And so it's, I don't know, it just always feels very, whenever
there's a lot of gratitude in there.
Underlying the whole thing. So
I guess I think you're right. That's part of it. Like for me, my assumption has always been that this can't last forever because of the industry we're in. I think as a team, I think we can move forward in some way, right? Doing something, but I think this industry is so unstable and hard to find success in that.
Well, and just like we talked about earlier in the episode, there are so many big players with infinite resources and money, always trying to take as much as they can from people like us, right? And so,
the competition is ever growing.
At some point, they're probably going to win.
Yeah,
they might.
They probably will.
It might be in 10 years. It might be next year. It might be after we retire. And we might make it. We might make it all the way to the end of our careers.
Yeah. And I do think I agree that it is like part of my own. I mean, I'm also getting kind of tired of the industry as a consequence of all that. But that's one of the things like we've been talking about too.
But also like what's the alternative? Like what other industry could you go to?
But we have one, right? Because that's part of like we've been talking about is like splitting off internal tools we made into software stuff, because it's what I'm starting to recognize. Like, I think I'm getting burnt out from doing this, but I don't want to not be doing this together. Right. So it's like, how do you find the way to like keep things going, but
which we've been aligned on, you know what I mean? We got aligned on that.
Exactly.
Let's do something.
Because like, and Adam said, you know, like I'm having a hard time kind of like with on like the games industry side of things. However, because we were working on so many really weird problems because of working on games, and Adam has built up this skill set, especially on the side of like web dev,
web software,
this crazy tech stuff, that we're like, okay, well, we still want you to be here, and you still want to be here.
Yeah.
So can we sort of like have you pivot what you're working on so that it's less about working directly with the games side of things and work on some new product or some new service or whatever that we can figure out sort of like how to diversify the studio's portfolio.
Yeah, because then we stay nicely in alignment where we're the stuff that I'm then trying to make still helps with making the games, right? And the common goal is still to be able to run this business more or less the way it is today, right? And into the long term and trying to mitigate our risk moving forward, right? But now it's an alternate way of doing that also is just that's better aligned with where I'm at mentally and in my stage of life, and like given how I feel when I look out at the industry, that pisses me off every day.
Part of what's funny about the games industry, I think about it kind of like the people thing we were talking about, which is like the strength of it is also the really fucking annoying thing about it, which is like, it's a creative industry. It's like buying a lotto ticket with every game you make. It's just a really expensive lotto ticket. And so, the fun part is that fact, right? Yep. You don't know what's going to happen when you launch a game.
But it's also the part that means you might not be able to do it tomorrow.
Exactly. It also sucks. And so it's, the longer you're in it, the longer you survived, I think,
like we talked about. It's like we talked about with people, right? Like people have certain things about them that are good and bad, and depends on the context as to whether that thing is good or bad.
The longer you're with a person, the longer you're in an industry, the more I think the facts of the negative stuff that you've had to constantly defend against just kind of wear you down a little bit. You know what I mean?
Kind of creeps up.
Well, and I think the way and I think and for me, it's also because like I was never into games. Like that was never my thing. I was into working with
science.
Yeah, I was into science, but I was into working with you guys to build this thing, right? To make this sort of whole endeavor work. But that's also kind of meant that like you guys are basically creating the thing that you're also really excited about. And I'm like trying to chip in, right? And I don't get it. It's like a whole like you're not getting
to build stuff in the same way.
Yeah, or not in a way that is like it feels like it's mine, right? If that makes any sense. Right. But I think in the industry in general, the way that people survive in the industry is because they love games. Because otherwise, nobody would fucking do it. Right? Put up with it. So it's because they love games. I think that was the thing I was trying to figure out. I think it's why we get to have these conversations, is because I can just say like, this has been I've been getting steadily more unhappy about just my role and like in the context of the games industry. And I can't use the fact that it's games to compensate for that, because I don't care enough about that fact. Yep. And so I can just have that conversation with these guys and just say like, okay, we got to do something because I can't sustain this. And we can just say,
okay.
Yeah. So then it was fine.
Then let's figure it out.
And then similarly, I know Sam's busy with babies and he's doing, he's taking a lot of time off because he has a lot of parental leave to catch up on, so he didn't get it during development. And so I'm like, I'm not going to then be like, I want to get out of this. I'm going to drop everything right now. Now it's fully Sam's responsibility. It's like, okay, let's figure out how to slowly transition carefully, because my goal first and foremost is still to have this studio be successful and work so that we can keep doing this.
I think at the core, it's like it's all lined. We're all very lined up on that fact, which is why anything that I feel like in a lot of business context might be like an earth shaking conversation is just like literally just happens sort of like randomly on a Discord call.
Yeah, it feels like it should have been a bigger deal that when I was just like, I want to transition out of games entirely because I'm doing a lot of shit. I'm managing all the look, I'm managing the biz dev, I'm managing all of our interactions with our third party like marketing and PR firms and all this stuff, right? Doing a lot of stuff and in theory managing the company, though it's mostly is sort of self-managing, but there's all this stuff where I'm like, I don't want to do any of that, right? And that's the kind of thing that normally, if I just said that, it would be like, well, this is the end. But it felt like a non-issue, right? To be able to just say that. Be like,
we've done it. We've also been doing this long enough that like we've done that a couple times, right?
Yeah, that's the reason I'm in this role right now, even is because you guys were like, oh, we can't make Crashlands 2 and also manage any of this stuff. And I was like, okay, that's mine then,
Yep. So. Just got to be open and honest and willing to keep things going.
It's all about that adaptation. It's like,
Speaking of keeping things going, let's end this episode.
Yeah, that's enough.
That's all the time we have. We'd like to thank our producers, Fat Bard and Sampa DaCosta, for putting the podcast together. And thanks to our community moderators who keep our Discord running. To get more involved in the Butterscotch community, just go to podcast.bscotch.net, where we have links to the community Discord, a way for you to donate to support the podcast, and links to the archives. And if you haven't yet, head on over to Steam, Google Play, or the App Store and pick up a copy of Crashlands 2. And if you have been playing it, go ahead and give it a review. A positive one would be the best. Yeah. Those are the ones that we prefer. So go ahead and do that. We'd appreciate it. And thank you all for listening. And we'll see you next week.
Goodbye.